My name's Lauren Curtis. I live in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a portrait artist. The whole purpose of Selfie Mode was to create something specific to Bethany Lutheran College, to take pictures of faculty, staff, students, and present them back to them as portraits. And that was intentional. I wanted it to be personal because the work that I do is personal to each client, and I wanted you guys to have that same experience. Growing up, me and my siblings were just always drawing. There was paper around, there were pencils around. Neither of my parents really had a super big interest in art. They didn't discourage us from doing it, but they didn't encourage us to do it. There wasn't like a big artist push. It just something happened with me and my siblings where we would just draw all the time. We had a printer and just reams of paper, and we would snatch them down and scribble on them. We made up characters. I had like 3 different superheroes that were all me, and I had powers. And I would draw them all the time. My sisters had the same things, and whose was better, and it was sort of this competition of who could draw better. And the more we did it, the better we got at it, and we all tried to get better at it, and we tried to push each other to get better. So then when I got to high school and I realized I was actually pretty good at this, I decided to pursue it. The first instance of painting other than it's a rainy day and mom wants to break out the watercolors was in high school when my Uncle Jimmy gave me a tackle box that he'd found at some antique show filled with oil paints that were really crusty and some painting mediums that were so dried on that you couldn't even really get them open. And I had that tackle box and I never touched it because I didn't know what oils were until my grandpa asked me to do a panoramic painting of the village that my grandma grew up in France. So he had taken all these photos and taped them together, printed it out, gave it to me, gave me this huge canvas and was like, make me this landscape, granddaughter. And I said, sure, Grandpa. And so I broke out the oils, attempted to use the medium, slapped it all together, did my very best. And that was my first real experience with oil painting. When I got to college, I had my tackle box, because I kept it, of course, and all my crusty old oils and mediums. And then I had a professor with me who taught me how to use them properly. And I just fell in love with it. It's not easy to control, but it's much easier to control than what I originally thought. And so I could create these colorful images that weren't just drawings. And I loved it. Right after I got done with painting 1, I think I went straight into painting 2. And that had a lot more freedom in terms of what our assignments were. So painting 1 was a lot of just straightforward still lives, learning how to use the paint, that sort of thing. Painting 2 had a lot more open assignments where we got to choose what we would paint, and we could paint from our imaginations even. So I would paint figures, paint people, just from my head onto the surface. They weren't very good, but it was then that my professor kind of took notice that all I was painting when I had the choice was people, and that's sort of how I realized that, yeah, people were the thing that was most interesting to me. So after that, I took an independent study in what I wanted to do was more figurative artwork, and I started with a couple studies of just wrinkly skin on really small canvases, just to kind of understand how to, paint flesh tones better. But my professor kind of pushed me more to faces. And so I did the rest of that independent study in just portraiture. During my independent study, I did all these portraits, and the English professor, or one of the English professors, took notice and asked me to do portraits of her grandchildren for her as a commission. And that was my first commission that I'd ever gotten. So every week I would bring a new portrait to her in her office, and she would get so excited and so happy to see, oh, you captured their energy, oh, that smile is so them. And that was really rewarding for me. And just knowing that I could do something like this and also get paid for it was what really pushed me to want to be a portrait artist. If you're interested in getting better as a portrait artist or just an artist in general, the main thing to think about is just that practice. Practice, practice, practice is what everyone always says. And they say it for a reason, because it's true. You need to practice, you need to get those motor skills, you need to be comfortable with your materials, and the only way to do that, the only way to get better is to be in it, is to keep doing it, is to, draw 50 ears to get comfortable with doing that. The other thing that's really important for drawing is to understand what it is that you're drawing or painting or, whatever medium you choose. For me, taking an anatomy class to better understand how humans work, how faces work, the muscles, the bone structure, all of that was super important in my ability to articulate faces better. Understanding translates to drawing like 1-to-1. It's just, you have to understand it to draw it accurately. So if you can do that and you can just put in the time and practice doing it 1,000 times, you're going to be so much closer to being the artist that you want to be.